Hi, ladies. Welcome to this week's episode of Courageous Chicks TV, where we're continuing to do a study of the book, The Secret Thoughts of Successful Women, about the imposter syndrome and why we suffer from it, but more importantly, what we can do to thrive in spite of it. And this week was so interesting to me because I had a couple of ahas that explained some things in my relationship with my husband. And we've been together 33 years and we've been married for 29 years next month. And there was a couple of things where it became clear about why we respond differently in the way we do to some certain situations. And so I'm going to share a little bit of that with you as we go on for today. So today was about how do we respond to failure, mistakes, and criticism. And this is about how you handle fear, and the mistakes and the criticism really have a huge impact on how competent and confident we feel. And this week, there really is a conversation about the differences between men and women and how we respond. And there's a lot of research that has found a very strong link between the fear of failure and the imposter syndrome, and especially about how men and women respond differently to these situations. And we'll talk about that. And obviously, not every person is going to fit into these categories the way they are. And it's not about, I said this very early on in our conversations, this is not about bashing men at all. And so it's just that we're different, and that's awesome. So one of the things that happens when we experience failure or mistake or criticism is that we think it must be me, right? It's got to be me as an individual. There's something wrong with me. And women tend to blame inward first. And where you blame, whether it's inward or outward, has a direct effect on the options you have for how to manage that. And so if you blame inward, you've made it personal. And then it really can lead to you feeling incompetent. And then the only solution to resolve that issue is to opt out of whatever situation that you're in. And in the book, she uses the example of female engineering students. And in some cases, when they received feedback, negative feedback or criticism, or had some setbacks, they blamed themselves. And so they thought they weren't competent enough, so they left the program, which is really very sad. If you are a person that blames outward, you tend to focus more on the facts of the situation. And then you have more options to solve the problem. So for example, if you gave a presentation and it didn't go as well as you wanted it to, if you blame outwardly, you would ask yourself, you would look more at the facts, and you might ask yourself about, or I guess maybe make an observation that, well, you didn't spend as much time in preparing as you could have. So that's something that you can solve. If you blame outward, you have more options to how to solve the problem, so it increases your confidence and your competence. And I talked a lot about taking action last week in terms of increasing your confidence and overcoming some fears. And so if you blame outward and you look at facts, it gives you more options to take action, which can increase your confidence. So this is really hard, though. It's not necessarily something that's easy to do because as women, we tend to internalize everything. So my husband and I have 2 adult daughters now. And so he lived in a house with 3 women. And many times there would be something that would happen, and he would, if he didn't do it, he would blame outward. He'd say, okay, who did this in the house? And then it got to be a joke. One of my daughters, and I don't remember who, and neither of them claim it at this point, but I distinctly remember at one point while they were still home, they said, Dad, you need to blame inward first. And that just was something that was, now I look back on it and I read this chapter and I thought, wow, men tend to blame outward first and women tend to blame inward. So now knowing that, it really gives me a different perspective on when something happens in the house. So now it's just the two of us at home. And so something happens, there's fewer people to blame. But the other day, there was something that happened, and I said, you need to blame inward. And so my husband says, Edward? Who's Edward? Why would I blame Edward? And obviously he misheard me, but now we have a joke in our house that we get to blame Edward for anything that happens there. So another thing we do as women that we can't stop thinking about is, do you endlessly revisit situations? I know I replay things so many times in my head. And in fact, even before things happen, I've kind of played things out so many times in my head. And when you're kind of thinking about that situation over and over and again and how it went, and maybe it wasn't as great as you thought, somebody says, well, just forget it, move on. And at least for me, I know that makes it worse. That makes it a lot worse. And genders tend to manage stress differently. So men tend towards a fight or flight. They either lash out or they tune out. And again, it's a tendency, it's not an absolute. And women, I love this phrase that she put in the book, go towards attend and befriend. That we like to talk it out when we're stressed or we have a situation that didn't go as we wanted it to and as we planned. Men want to find solutions and fix problems. Thus, the get over it, just move on kind of response that they can provide. They want to fix it and move on. Women tend to want to express our thoughts and our feelings. And for us, this is the solution to the problem, is this we want to talk about it. And then after we talk about it, maybe there's follow-up action, maybe not. That might have fixed whatever it was that happened. Okay, so when we have these things that come into us about it's me personally, or I'm internalizing what it is that's happened, what can we do about it? So there was several pieces of guidance in the book, but some of the things that really resonated with me is that sometimes you win, sometimes you learn. And it's not about failure. It's about you've made a choice and now you have more information and now you have options that you can choose with that information and make some other decisions. So mistakes are a part of life. And what you can control, though, is you can control your response to those. And one of the things that she also talks about in the book is if you think about sports, for example, and football, that the game's played on a Sunday, and then the next day or two, the players go into the office and they watch the game tape. Now, frankly, they might have just won the Super Bowl, and they probably don't watch the game tape right away, but they do watch the game tape after. Maybe it was the best game ever. They still watch the tape afterward to find out how they can improve. Look at what can they learn from what happened there. So another strategy is that if you have a situation where things didn't quite go as you wanted them to, you can visualize a scenario where things did go according to how you want it to. So again, it's learning about what we can do. How can we respond positively for things that have happened the way that maybe it wasn't our choice the way it happened. The other thing, or another thing that you can do, is if you feel like you maybe respond from an emotional or a feeling place, you can ask your logical self to come to the conversation and ask your logical, factual self to weigh in on the conversation and sort of balance the picture out now with that information, in addition to that maybe more feeling side of things. So when you do receive, say, critical feedback, and I like the phrase critical feedback as opposed to criticism, because that way it's viewed as something that could really be helpful and be more constructive. But evaluate the input that you get. First of all, if the source that you're getting the feedback from is somebody that you are respected or that you respect, then take the fact that they're providing you feedback as a compliment, because they believe that with the feedback you can improve and you are competent enough to improve, that it is a compliment to you. You can also head this off at the pass, that instead of waiting for feedback, you can seek it out. You can go to somebody that you trust their feedback, that you really value their input, and you can ask them. You know that they're going to provide you some things that are really going to be helpful for you. You can ask your question or consider whether the constructive criticism you got is wrong. It's very possible it might be wrong. We are all human beings and we're doing the best we can. And it may just be that it's not accurate. It's not right. And so you don't have to take it as if it's so. You get to choose what you do with it. So a couple of other strategies to sort of end with today. One of them is that she suggested, and I think this was a women's soccer coach, can't remember who, but use the Q-tip. Use Q-tip as an acronym, and you can even take Q-tips and stick them up around your house, but quit taking it personally. Use Q-tip as an acronym. Quit taking it personally. So often the feedback we get is not personal towards us, but we have a tendency to internalize it and blame ourselves first before we blame Edward. And so don't take it personally. And I think the other thing too is to watch our thoughts and language. I've talked in the previous sessions about your noticing superpower, really having an awareness about the thoughts that are coming into your head and what your words are saying. That as opposed to saying, I am fill in the blank, you can turn that around once you notice you're saying things that way and say, I feel, because then you have, again, more options where you haven't internalized it, you've externalized it, and you can then make some choices about what you want to do with that situation. So next week, we're going to learn about how a new response to failure, mistakes, and criticism can boost our confidence. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're enjoying the series. I'd love to hear your takeaways from this week and just any other topics that you might be interested in. I've got a gazillion books I'm always reading. New ones come all the time, and I love to read and share my learnings with others, and I hope you're finding it helpful. Thank you again. We'll see you next week.